guys, I'm back. Give myself a little bit more room. So I wanted to come on today to do a quick video about Memorial Day. For us in America, this is a holiday weekend, so a lot of people, ooh, look at my fat roll. A lot of people have off on Monday, which I do. For a long time I didn't, because even though I'm in the medical field still, my job is a Monday through Friday day job because there isn't emergency mammograms. But I used to have to work through it. But I always wanted to take at least a minute out of my day to remember what Memorial Day really means. I think sometimes it gets lost. In America, we tend to think it's a holiday, it's a time to go get a whole bunch of beer and cook hamburgers and hot dogs and cook out, which is great. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that. Absolutely, you get a day off. The weather is usually pretty nice. So hopefully you will do that and have, some time with family. But I wanted to show you how I like to just kind of remember what we remember on this day. And I think in Europe or Canada too, you have Remembrance Day, which is very similar. And it's a day to remember the veterans who fell, who gave their lives to fight for what we have in this country, in your country, fight for what you have in your country, and gave their lives for that, which is very important. And it's funny, as a liberal Democrat, a lot of people think that we do not like, oh, hi, Robin. Hi. That we do not support our troops. And that couldn't be further from the truth. For one thing, like I said, my husband is a vet, and my son is in the Navy, and I absolutely support the troops. I just don't always support the administration that is sending our troops out there. But, ooh, I almost got something in my drink. That would have been gross. So what I'd like to do is just show you a little incense that I am going to be putting together. And read a poem that I used to read to my kids as they were growing up, that kind of gives them something to understand what we're doing. And so just to start out with, when we think over here, and I'm not sure if it's the same in Europe or in Canada or any place else, but when we remember our veterans and talk about those who have fallen in the service, we buy poppies, and everybody kind of wears a red poppy. And so in order to remember what that's about, there's been a ton of poems out there and stuff. So let me just start with the poem that I used to read my kids, and I couldn't find my copy of it. This is by an unknown author. So whoever wrote it, it was a long time ago, and it just kind of went out of favor or whatever, and so whoever wrote it is kind of lost now. But it's called A Poem for Remembrance Day, The Inquisitive Mind of a Child. Why are they selling poppies, Mommy? Selling poppies in town today. The poppies, child, are flowers of love for the men who marched away. But why have they chosen a poppy, Mommy? Why not a beautiful rose? Because, my child, men fought and died in the fields where the poppies grow. But why are the poppies so red, Mommy? Why are the poppies so red? Red is the color of blood, my child, the blood that our soldiers shed. The heart of the poppy is black, Mommy. Why does it have to be black? Black, my child, is the symbol of grief for the men who never came back. But why, Mommy, are you crying so? Your tears are giving you pain. My tears are my fears for you, my child, for the world is forgetting again. Whew. So, I just, in the hustle and bustle of everything, hopefully you can just take a moment to remember that, a lot of people have died in fighting for one thing or another, and unfortunately, sometimes it's not what we would call a good reason, for sure. So I also will be lighting a candle. And I'm making a little incense today. So I got my little herbal book out. if you watched my other video. This is a compendium of herbal magic by Paul Barrel. And just kind of looked through some of the things that I wanted to put in there and why. One of the things I decided to put in, obviously, was poppy seeds, because of that remembrance. And the reason for the poppy seeds apparently was because there's a very old poem. Actually, I brought that up too, I think, which is called In Flanders Fields. And it was written in 1918 during the First World War by a Canadian named Dr. John McCrae, because he saw poppies growing between the crosses, that when they buried their dead from World War I, the poppies were growing up. They were the first thing to grow up in that field, in Flanders Field, and that was one of their big battles in World War I. So that kind of started it. He wrote this poem about it called In Flanders Fields. And so that's why that we all use poppies now, because it started with that poem. So, and by the way, again, I want to make sure you understand you can use anything you want that you feel is a good herb for Memorial Day. I just kind of looked up some of the correspondences. Obviously, poppy, was because of Memorial Day. One of the herbs I'm going to use is willow bark. So I'm just going to put some willow bark into, this is my cast iron mortar and pestle, and I use my cast iron one quite a bit. This one or the granite one or the marble one usually, but and willow bark is for a very specific reason also, which they talked about in this book very well. So let me just read you real quickly why I'm using the willow. So the weeping willow was one of the first sacred herbs of my childhood. At a very early age, a forked branch was cut from the magnificent willow on our family farm, and I was successful at my first dousing. When my parents left Pine Lawn Farm, they took willow cuttings, and a year later, when they purchased the house which is still their home, our family willow was given a new life. Just 2 years ago, I asked my father to send me several cuttings, which are now growing here at the Hermit's Grove. This is the author's place where she grows herbs. A fierce storm raged through my parents' town the following autumn, bringing down their willows, but the tree lives on, and I am very aware of its immortality representation. This virtue was long ago recognized by the Chinese because even the smallest piece of willow is able to bring forth another living tree. It is said that the Hebrew peoples in Babylon, while wandering on their long journey, came to a willow which reminded them of their home. They hung their harps on it and mourned the loss of their homeland. So the willow has a meaning of, it's called the herb of immortality in some places. They use it in pagan funerals a lot. It's one of the herbs that is put into pagan funeral incense is the willow. And it's also an herb of Hecate, which if you follow pagan religion, Hecate is the goddess of the underworld. So that, makes sense. So I just thought the willow would be an appropriate herb to add in here to kind of signify the immortality or the reincarnation or the recreation or interconnectedness, however you want to call it. I don't believe that when we leave this earthly body that our spirit just is done, because it's energy, and we know that energy can never die. It just goes on and changes form. So that is a great herb to add in there. I'm also going to put some myrrh resin. Now normally I try to put some resin in with incense that I'm using, because for one thing, resin is just really great with anything that you're burning. When you're burning an incense. A resin is a great thing to do because it makes the smoke very scented. It's great for scent. So some of this stuff, like the willow, may not have a very distinct scent. It does give off kind of a woody scent, but it's not, like, I don't know if I could tell the difference between maple bark and willow bark. But I can tell the difference between myrrh resin and amber resin, or benzoin, or dragon's blood. So then I crush that all up really good. Myrrh, again, myrrh is used in tons of funeral rites, including some Christian funeral rites. It's for grieving. You use it for emotional recovery, for understanding death and dying, and peaceful transitioning. So that is a great herb to use. One last thing I'm going to add in here, because it symbolizes the other world. And again, part of the peaceful transitioning is star anise. Okay, so it's literally looks like a star. That anise smell is just awesome. So I'm going to crush some of that up in there. So then when I burn this, two things. One is I put it on a charcoal disc. So if you don't have a little charcoal disc, you can always use a piece of charcoal and your lighter, and just light the piece of charcoal. Just make sure you have it in a fire-safe dish or in your fireplace. I don't know if I would put it on your grill if you're cooking on it, unless you know you can clean it out afterwards and you're not using any kind of deadly herb. But you can use any kind of fire-safe dish, so brass, silver, all that kind of stuff is all fireproof. Cast iron, if you have a cast iron frying pan, you can dedicate one cast iron pan to your magical stuff and not eat out of it, is my suggestion for that. So, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this, but it looks great. You put it, you light the charcoal disc. You make sure that the charcoal disc is really hot. So, you know, you don't light it and put it on there right away. Once it's hot, then you add the herb to it. And then you can do a meditation. You can just sit quietly and think about your ancestor, if you have your own ancestor who lost their lives serving the country. I'm going to give you just a list of some of the herbs that I felt would be good for this kind of working. Meditation, whatever you want to call that. So there is herbs that symbolize the other world and crossing over is star anise, asphodel, dittany of Crete, elder, so the bark of elder, elm. So if you have an elm tree, go scrape a little bit of bark off of that. If you ask the tree, and you leave, usually for trees, I leave milk or honey, or, you know, whatever you feel the tree wants. And even better if I can find, you know, a branch that has fallen or something like that, and I don't have to actually scrape the tree. Foxglove, lotus, pomegranate, rampion, and willow. So all of those things symbolize the other world. Inner peace is symbolized with agrimony, benzoin, burnet, cinnamon. You have cinnamon in your spice shelves, add some of that into there. Lavender, olive, passion flower, violets, water lilies, symbolizing grieving. So if you have someone that has passed, you know, within, I don't know, the last 5 years or so that you know, and you're still, you know, somewhat emotionally grieving. Bluebells, myrrh, periwinkle, sage, thyme, violets. Thyme and sage, everybody's got at least thyme in your herb cupboard, right? Family protection. So, oh, the one thing I didn't add, when I think of protection, anytime I'm doing anything regarding my ancestors, I add tobacco. And as a matter of fact, I have to have my father give me some, try to send me up a couple of tobacco leaves from North Carolina, because it's not like I go out and buy tobacco at the store. I only have all natural tobacco that I have picked and dried myself. And tobacco is very much about protection and family protection, especially if in your history, in your line, anybody smoked. There's some connection with that tobacco smell that is very powerful. So also for family protection, basil. Everybody has basil in your cupboard. Add a couple of these herbs into whatever your working is, and that makes a great incense. Fern, snapdragon. Emotional recovery. So let's say it's fairly recent that this person has passed and you really are grieving still and you're having a hard time recovering from that grief. Myrrh is a good one for that also. Sage, tulip, and yarrow. So tulip time just has passed or is starting to pass. I was just going to look and see. Nope, none of my tulips are blossoming anymore. I'm wondering if some of the petals are still there. I didn't take a couple this year and dry them, but I usually do so I can keep them. And yarrow. For death, to ease the transition of death, there's two herbs, and I use the term herb lightly. It's anything that you can burn. Sometimes it's something you can ingest. Resin is not necessarily an herb. Bark is not necessarily an herb, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm talking about herbal things that I use for intention setting. There's two main things for death. One is called aconite. It's a very emotional herb. It's one of the herbs that shamans use to pierce the veil. It helps to pierce the veil so that you can see through the veil or connect through the veil to someone that you love. And the other thing is banana. Isn't that weird? And banana, if you want to use that, peel a banana, and you can just even use the skins and dry the skins out. If you don't have a lot of time, put them in the oven and dry them out a little bit, and they will burn. And that is a great connector. And then death and dying in general. So that whole process. Again, the aconite, alder, asphodite, basil, bluebells, camphor, chrysanthemum. You might have chrysanthemums coming up. Coconut, dragon's blood, elder, elm, holly. I have holly plants right here, so I could, take a couple leaves off of them. I actually have a huge jar of holly because I have my bushes out here. Iris, lotus, marigold, which that's one thing I was looking for. So I thought I brought out marigolds because I was going to add some marigold flowers to this also, but I didn't bring it out with me. Myrrh, narcissus, nightshade, which if you are going to use that, please be careful. Make sure that you're outside when you're burning it. It is a good herb to use for a lot of things, but you don't want to ingest or inhale that smoke. So make sure you're outside in a well-ventilated area because it could be a deadly herb. Parsley, should have that. Pennyroyal, rosemary, everybody should have rosemary. Sandalwood, which again, if you have some, great. It's not an herb that I carry anymore. I'm just kind of using up what I have because they're in danger. Sycamore and tansy. So there you go. You should have enough in your cupboard right now, or in your yard, or in your neighbor's yard, just be careful, that you can make up your own incense and just burn it as an homage to someone that you loved that passed in the service, or has passed and was in the service. It doesn't have to be someone who died in battle, in duty. Even if you don't know anyone and you want to recognize the ancestors that you didn't know, that were in the service, or people you didn't know that you just want to recognize them. That's okay too. So hopefully you all have a wonderful, wonderful Memorial Day. I'm going to be working on my herb videos for the rest of the night. And I have 3 days, so hopefully I will be uploading more videos. I hope you guys don't get too sick of me. I know I get no videos and then quite a few in a week. So I will talk to you very soon. I'll talk to you later about it. I think I'm gonna start a new channel for something a little bit different. And those of you who want to follow that channel also, that's great. If you don't and you're not interested in that part, don't feel obligated. Blessings, guys. Have a great weekend.